The viewers have spoken, and welcome to Q&A number 3. But before I begin, I just want to apologize for the frequency of my postings. I'm just coming out of the most busy time of the year for me, including juries and recitals and trying to play gigs. So I apologize that I haven't been able to post videos as often as possible, but now that my college year is winding to an end, that's definitely going to change, and I have a lot of new things planned for the channel coming forward, including some new video formats, and I'm giving away a bass. Stay tuned. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button, like the video, and let's get started. As a veteran bassist, how do you personally visualize walking bass lines when playing? For instance, do you still think of fundamental patterns like walk-ups and scales during a song, or do you just focus on what the next chord is in advance? At this point, if I'm thinking about notes, I might be in trouble, but I'm thinking more shapes, directions, and colors. So I might go for a note. I'm definitely playing in one direction, or I'm trying to, and things like drops tend to reveal themselves in the middle of a song just instinctually. I always tell my students, you know how comfortable you are playing an F blues? Every song you play should be that comfortable. So if I'm thinking about changes, it means I need to work on that song a little more. What do you practice? Do you have a warm-up exercise? Do you also play, study, practice classical music? I don't think I do anything special. I play through all my major and minor scales. I have some bowing exercises I like to play. I love to play Bach. I do practice Bach. I'll be playing Bach until the day I die because it's incredible music and it's a great workout. I also work on tunes that I don't know. Yeah, my advice is get a routine and stick with your routine. That'll let you know where you're at. It's very much like working out. A bassist has to be able to know and name the chord tones for every chord. Do you know an efficient method exercise for learning this practically? There are actually 3 things I would tell you to do. First, visualization. See the notes on the staff. See the chords and pitches. Number 2, play some piano. Get to know the piano so that you can play the changes and know what they look like and how they sound. And number 3, play everything in all 12 keys. All 12 keys, that'll help you, guaranteed. Any tips for keeping walking bass lines original without sounding like you're repeating yourself every time through the changes? First of all, don't get hung up on how cool your line should sound. Really, you're in a supportive mode, so the first person you should be listening to is whoever is soloing. Secondly, make sure if you play something that sounds good, you can play it again. The jazz police aren't going to stop you for playing something again in a chorus. Listen to Paul Chambers on So What on Miles Davis's Kinda Blue. He plays the same 2 measures about 4 or 5 times in the first chorus. Check it out. What's more important, being able to play every song or being creative and developing your own style? I'm definitely going to say being creative and developing your own style is just a little more important, but if you're going to play jazz, you have to know the repertoire, and the more songs you learn, the better you'll get. So do both. What are some of the first jazz standards you teach your students? Well, I like to pick things where they don't have to think about creating walking bass lines. Things like Cantaloupe Island, All Blues, Song from My Father, things that have set bass lines so that they can learn how to listen and play form and get through a tune. Did you struggle with confidence as a young musician? If so, what helped or helps you? John, most of us struggle with this confidence thing. I'm in my 40s and I'm still having moments where occasionally I'll think, am I even good at this? Does this even sound good? But I consider myself a work in progress, and in order to progress, you got to make mistakes. So be nice to yourself, be kind, and in the meantime, try to latch on to the easiest things you can do. Maybe make a 4-bar phrase that sounds really good and is simple. Make that turnaround at the end of the chorus a masterpiece. Maybe make the bridge simple, clear, and swinging. Remember that when sports teams are struggling, they line up and they run the easiest plays to get their confidence back. Also, sometimes all we need is a good day off, so Hey Paul, as a fellow not too much of a high action on the double bass, how do you deal with rental basses? I have my first ever overseas tour this summer and will have to deal with a rental, and I am scared of having to play a bass on which I am not able to play at my best. Do you know if rental companies can offer setups? What are your tips? Benjamin, unfortunately I can only offer you my condolences. This is a phenomenon that most touring bass players have to deal with, known as the bass du jour. And that means sometimes it can be a wonderful instrument, and sometimes, unfortunately, it can be a pretty bad one. The only advice I can give you is to get the instrument in as far advance as possible, so that if you have to make any tweaks, moving the bridge around or anything like that, you'll have a lot of time to get the bass to a playable state. Good luck. What sparked your interest in bass or music in general? Any particular genre or artist that influenced you when you were younger? Believe it or not, when I was a kid, most kids were offered music when we were growing up and going through school. It was kind of normal to take piano lessons. I played a little violin. I kind of settled on the trumpet when I was in middle school, and I discovered progressive rock through my best friend during that time and switched to bass. And that was my bread and butter for a long time. Rush, yes, ELP, and then that kind of naturally changed into fusion, Return to Forever, Chick Corea, and that kind of brought me into straight ahead. Thoughts on playing electric bass with a pick? Any players come to mind? I think it sounds pretty good, honestly, just different. I love the sound of a bass being played with a pick. Anthony Jackson is a genius in this department. I also love the way Marcus Miller plays with a pick. He's got a bunch of tracks he plays on. Monk Montgomery plays amazing with a pick, and Bobby Vega is amazing. If you've never heard of him, check him out. When you were younger, did you say yes to every gig? How do you determine what gigs to say no to as you became more in demand? For sure, I said yes to every gig because that's how you get good fast. You play as many gigs as possible. I also firmly believe that you can learn something from every gig you're on, good and bad, any style. So if you're young especially, pay your dues, play as many gigs as possible. Also, when I was growing up, there was no guarantee that if I said no to one gig, that another gig was going to somehow pop up and fill it in the space. I've always looked at all these little gigs as kind of my resume, my body of work. Play as much as you can. A few years ago, the demands of my teaching schedule and life and YouTube started to weigh on me, so I cut back a little bit on my schedule, but I'm still pretty busy, and I would play more if I could because that's the best way to get good fast. I really liked your video about Bob Cranshaw and the one on free jazz. Do you have any other stories to share about musicians that you admire and look up to? I definitely have a lot of wonderful stories having played with some people, but I'm going to do a couple videos coming up in the near future where I talk about my experience touring with Maynard Ferguson and Big Bop Nouveau and making a record with him. And I want to do a video about my experience with Stanley Turrentine and what it was like to be the bass player in his last touring group. So stay tuned. What is the best way to practice holding down a solid groove? You need to play, and you need to play with great time. So start with a metronome or a drum machine. The second thing would be to put on your favorite groove, a recording of your favorite groove, and play along with it a lot. The third thing would be to get together with some musicians, preferably some musicians that are better than you, like a great drummer you respect or a rhythm section, and play grooves with them. Do as much playing of great grooves as possible with really great musicians and watch how fast you get good. When walking over a modal tune or just multiple bars of the same chord, how does one keep the line interesting and melodic? Targets. Pick different chord tones. Instead of the root, walk toward the third, walk toward the fifth, toward the seventh. Target your lines, shape them, but the most important thing is to listen to the soloist and let the soloist be your guide. How would you rate finding work and gigging in the Pittsburgh area? Personally, my experience has been great, but I play bass. I think mediocre bass players will work in almost any environment. Everybody needs a bass player. But the work here, especially as of late, has been wonderful. I've had an opportunity to play a lot of great quality jazz with musicians I love in bona fide jazz clubs, and I can't ask for much more than that. It's a pretty good time to be a jazz musician in Pittsburgh right now. The only appropriate question I can post under this channel name: favorite Jaco Pastorius bass line? This one's easy. Opus Pocus. It's slippery with the fretless kind of playing in the first section, and then in the second section, he breaks it down in his classic style. Opus Pocus. How do you know what to play? How do I know what I'm playing is okay? I've been told that I must stick to the context and play accordingly to what I hear from the musicians I'm playing with, but I still don't really get it. Sounds to me like you're playing with some musicians that are a little ahead of where you're at, which is perfect. Keep playing. Lock into something, learn how to listen, and do whatever they tell you to do. You'll get better. What is the best way to learn to play without it being boring or monotonous? Once I start, I don't want to stop. This is great news, but unfortunately, there's going to be some part of making music that's going to be tedious if you want to get really good. We have to discipline ourselves to get into practice habits and to practice those really fine little things that will make us great. Especially at the beginning, there's going to be stuff that seems really monotonous, but you've got to push through and work on the monotonous stuff. And when you start seeing progress, you'll love it. Keep going. When playing jazz, do you find yourself using a bow very often? I actually set a requirement for myself every single gig where I have to play one solo with the bow. Every single gig, I try to make myself play at least one solo with the bow. Most often it's on a ballad because I feel a little more comfortable doing it that way. But yeah, I love to play with the bow. I love Paul Chambers, McBride, Slam Stewart, and I try to do it as often as I can. What is essential for a new bass player? I see a lot of ads for pickups, pedal boards, strings, and I'm a little overwhelmed. Really, all you need is a good bass with a decent setup and an amp. That's it. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that all this other stuff is necessary. It's just people trying to make money. You need a good bass, preferably like a Fender Jazz, and an amp. That's it. Work on the music. Any thoughts on Mark King or Michael Manring or Victor Bailey? Amazing, incredible, superlative, astonishing. I love all three of those guys. In fact, I'm going to be doing a video fairly soon on Victor Bailey. He's absolutely one of my favorite bass players and somebody I feel people don't talk about enough, so stay tuned. Since sound tone is very personal for bassists, what are your feelings on personal amplification? How much is too much or too little? I think this is very subjective depending on who you are, how old you are, and the kind of stuff you listen to. I tend to like a sound that's mostly coming from the instrument itself, and I like to use the amplification to boost that sound when applicable. I don't like a ton of sound coming out of the amp that's going to cover up the acoustic sound of the bass, but I do like a little bit of sound coming out to support what I'm doing so that I can hear myself and I don't have to play too hard. Well, that's it for now. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to everybody's question, but I love to do these Q&As and look back on the last year of creation on YouTube and see how far I've come, and I definitely have come a long way thanks to all of you. Thanks for being here on this journey. Like I said, I have some really wonderful new things happening for the channel coming up, and I'm giving away a bass. I'm approaching a pretty big milestone that's going to happen in the next couple of months, and I hope you'll be around to see the special things that I have planned. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, please love your neighbor.